Good evening, and thank you for choosing to spend this quiet time with me tonight. I hope you've settled into a comfortable position, perhaps with a pillow adjusted just right, the lights dimmed low, the day's concerns finally fading. Tonight, we're going to explore something you might not think about often, the history of keeping things cold. Not a tale of dramatic discoveries or sudden breakthroughs, but a slow, patient journey through 25 centuries of human ingenuity, watching ice harvested from frozen lakes, smelling the damp sawdust of ice houses, hearing the quiet hum of compressors, feeling the satisfying cold of a refrigerator door opening on a summer afternoon. We'll move slowly through ancient Persia and Rome, stand in medieval root cellars, watch New England ice harvesters at work on frozen lakes, observe the first clumsy refrigeration machines, and eventually arrive in modern kitchens where refrigerators hum quietly through the night. We'll meet ice cutters and deliverymen, housewives managing iceboxes, engineers tinkering with compressors, and all the ordinary people whose lives were quietly transformed by the ability to preserve food. There's no hurry. We have time. The cold can wait. If this story helps you rest tonight, I'd be grateful if you'd consider liking or subscribing. I'm always curious where in the world you might be listening from. Feel free to leave a comment with your city and what time it is there. But there's no pressure. That can wait for tomorrow, if at all. For now, adjust your blanket one last time. Let your breathing slow. Close your eyes if you haven't already. We're going to step back in time more than 2,000 years to a world where summer heat meant spoiled food and winter's cold was the only preservation available. Let yourself drift back with me. There's nowhere else you need to be. Ancient cold. Imagine you are standing in the desert of ancient Persia in what is now Iran around the year 400 BCE. The sun beats down mercilessly, the air shimmering with heat that rises from the baked earth. The temperature will reach well over 100 degrees by midday, the kind of heat that makes every breath feel like inhaling from an oven. But you're watching something remarkable, the construction of a yakchal, an ice house, a structure designed to hold ice through the blazing summer months. The yakchal rises from the desert floor like a giant beehive, its dome-shaped roof already 12 feet high and still growing. The walls are extraordinarily thick, perhaps 6 feet at the base, made from mud bricks mixed with sand, clay, egg whites, lime, goat hair, and ash, a special mixture that hardens to stone-like strength and insulates better than any material available. Workers move in practiced rhythm, carrying bricks up wooden scaffolding, laying each one carefully, checking alignment, spreading mortar, building upward and inward as the dome takes shape. You walk around the structure to the entrance. Here a sloping ramp leads down into the earth, descending 20 feet below ground level, where the temperature remains constant, regardless of the season's fury above. The underground chamber is vast, capable of holding dozens of tons of ice, its floor slightly sloped toward drainage channels that will carry away melt water. The walls here are even thicker than above, and the air already feels different, cooler, damper, sheltered from the sun's assault. But where will the ice come from here in the desert? You turn and see the answer. A series of shallow pools, each one perhaps 30 feet long and only a few inches deep, stretching away from the yakchal toward the mountains visible in the distance. These pools, called yakchal ponds, are fed by Kanat systems, underground aqueducts that bring water from mountain sources without exposing it to evaporation under the sun. Winter arrives. Imagine you're standing beside these same pools on a clear January night. The desert cold is shocking after summer's heat. Temperatures plummet to well below freezing. Your breath forms clouds in the darkness. Stars crowd the sky, so many they seem to touch each other, and their light reflects off the water in the pools, turning the surface into black mirrors. Workers arrive before dawn, perhaps 50 men wrapped in wool cloaks, carrying tools, long poles with hooks, shovels, baskets. They move quietly, efficiently, their movements practiced from years of repetition. This is urgent work. The ice must be harvested before the sun rises and begins its warming, before the thin sheets of ice melt back into water. The ice master walks along the pools, testing thickness by pressing with his staff. Here, this pool is ready. The ice is perhaps an inch thick, formed during the long, cold night. At his signal, workers step onto the ice carefully, testing their weight, then begin breaking it into manageable sections. The sound echoes in the pre-dawn silence, sharp cracks as ice fractures, splashing as pieces tilt, and water flows over their edges, the scrape of poles hooking the sections and pulling them to shore. Each sheet of ice is lifted carefully, 2 men gripping the edges, water streaming from the surfaces, and carried toward the Yakchal entrance. The descent into the underground chamber is treacherous. Ice is slippery, the ramp is steep, the darkness nearly complete except for oil lamps placed at intervals. The first sheets are laid on the chamber floor, positioned carefully to cover the entire surface. Then more ice is layered on top, and with each layer, workers spread insulation, straw, sawdust, sometimes just sand from the desert, creating barriers that will slow the melting. You follow a worker down into the chamber as the sun begins to rise. Inside, the change is immediate and profound. The temperature drops, the air thick with cold, moisture condensing on the brick walls and dripping down in slow rivulets. The smell is distinctive: damp earth, wet straw, the clean, sharp scent of ice, the mustiness of underground spaces. The sound is the drip of water, the whisper of straw being spread, the quiet voices of workers calling instructions in the echoing space. Layer after layer accumulates through the winter. On the coldest nights, when conditions are perfect, multiple pools freeze and multiple harvests occur. By late winter, the Yakchal holds many tons of ice, packed tight with insulation, the entrance sealed with wooden doors and plastered over with mud to prevent any warm air from entering. Spring arrives, then summer. The desert returns to its furnace heat. But deep underground, the ice remains. You find yourself watching on a scorching July afternoon as a servant of a wealthy merchant approaches the Yakchal. He carries a bronze tool shaped like a pick and thick cloth sacks. He removes the mud seal from the entrance. This itself takes time, chipping carefully to avoid damaging the door, and pulls open the heavy wooden portal. Cold air rushes out, a shock in the summer heat, visible as a white mist that flows down the ramp like water, dissipating in the hot air. The servant descends into darkness, and you follow. Inside, the temperature is perhaps 40 degrees, astonishingly cold after the 100-degree heat above. Your eyes adjust slowly. The ice is still there, diminished from winter's height, but still substantial, covered in layers of damp straw. The servant uses his pick to chip away at the ice, breaking off chunks, filling his sacks. The sound echoes, the chink of bronze on ice, the crack of pieces breaking free, the rustle of ice being bagged. He works quickly, not wanting to leave the chamber open longer than necessary, each minute of open door allowing warm air to enter and accelerate the melting. 5 minutes, and he's finished, carrying his sacks of ice back up into the devastating heat. This ice will be taken to his master's home, where it will be used to cool drinks. Sharbat, made from fruit juices and sugar, poured over shaved ice, a luxury almost beyond imagining in this climate. Or the ice might be used to cool a room, placed in brass bowls where it slowly melts, its cold radiating outward, lowering the temperature by a few precious degrees. Or used to preserve meat, allowing it to last another day or two without spoiling. But this is only for the wealthy. Most people will never taste ice in summer, never feel its coldness, never know the relief it brings. They rely on other methods: storing food in the coolest part of the house, cooking only what can be eaten immediately, drying and salting meat, making cheese and yogurt that last longer than fresh milk. Spoilage is constant, expected, a fact of life. Food rots, milk sours within hours. Meat turns within a day. The yakchal represents an enormous investment of labour and resources affordable only to the rich or to communities that build them collectively. But where they exist, they perform their quiet miracle, holding winter's cold through summer's heat, a defiance of the natural order, a small victory against time and decay. You watch as the servant seals the entrance again, carefully, plastering mud over every gap, preserving the cold inside. Tomorrow he'll return for more ice. The day after again. Through the entire summer, the yakchal gives up its treasure slowly, the ice diminishing, the straw insulation becoming damp and less effective, but lasting, until autumn approaches and the need lessens, until winter returns and the pools freeze again and the cycle begins anew. Rome and the mountains. Time moves forward. Imagine you find yourself now in the mountains above Rome, in the Apennines, on a winter morning around 50 BCE. Snow lies thick on the slopes, perhaps 6 feet deep in the drifts, pure white under a pale sky. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, each inhalation a sharp pain in the lungs, each exhalation a cloud of vapour. You're watching a different kind of harvest. Here, there are no ice houses, no careful preservation. Instead, this is simply brute force, gathering snow and ice from the mountains and transporting it to Rome before it melts. A temporary solution, but Rome's wealthy demand cold drinks and cooled wine, and they have the money to pay for it. Slaves work the slopes, dozens of them, using wooden shovels to dig snow from the drifts, packing it into large earthenware jars, each jar perhaps 3 feet tall and 2 feet across. The snow is packed tight, compressed, tamped down until the jar is full, then sealed with a wooden lid wrapped in cloth. The packed snow is denser than loose snow, will melt more slowly, but it's still a race against time. Other slaves load the jars onto pack mules, securing them carefully with rope, 2 jars per animal balanced on either side. The caravan assembles, perhaps 20 mules, each one carrying 2 jars, each jar holding maybe 50 pounds of snow, a ton of snow total. The overseer checks the loads, tests the ropes, counts the animals. Then the caravan begins its descent. You follow them down the mountain paths, treacherous with ice, steep and narrow, the mules moving carefully, their breath steaming. The snow in the jars is already beginning to melt at the edges, water seeping through the seal, dripping onto the path. The slaves walking alongside the mules are wrapped in every cloth they own, but still they shiver, their fingers numb, their feet aching from cold. The journey to Rome takes 2 days in good weather, longer if storms close the passes. The caravan stops at night in rough shelters, caves or stone huts, where the jars are covered with pine branches and sheep fleeces for additional insulation. The slaves huddle around small fires, eating hard bread and onions, their clothes steaming as they dry, then freezing again when they step back outside. You arrive in Rome on the 2nd evening. The city is warmer than the mountains, of course, but winter here is still cold, and the snow in the jars has survived reasonably well. Perhaps 1/3 has melted. Acceptable loss. The caravan makes its way through the city streets to a wealthy villa on the Palatine Hill. Servants unload the jars and carry them down stone steps into an underground storage area, a cellar dug deep beneath the villa, its walls lined with stone, the floor covered with straw. Here, in the relative cool and darkness, the snow will be stored until needed. More straw is piled around and on top of the jars, insulating them from the warmer air above. Days later, you watch as a slave is sent to fetch snow for his master's dinner party. He descends into the cellar, removes the insulation from one jar, opens the lid. Inside, the snow has partially melted and refrozen into a dense mass, more ice than snow now, but still usable. He chips out chunks with an iron tool, fills a bronze bowl, and carries it up to the kitchen. The cook receives the ice, examines it critically. Is it clean? Does it smell fresh? Satisfied, he begins shaving it with a knife, creating fine fragments that he mixes with wine, honey, and spices, creating a cooled drink that will be served to the master's guests. The guests will exclaim at the novelty, the luxury, the refreshing coldness sliding down their throats. They'll never see the slaves who harvested the snow, who walked the mountain paths, who risked frostbite and exhaustion to bring this small pleasure to the dinner table. But this is wasteful, inefficient, expensive. Only the wealthiest Romans can afford it, and only in winter and early spring when snow is available in the mountains. By summer it's impossible. The snow melts faster than it can be transported. Rome returns to room-temperature wine and warm food storage, accepting spoilage as inevitable. Yet some Romans have their own solution. You find yourself now at a villa outside Rome on a wealthy estate, watching the construction of a snow pit. This is simpler than the Persian yakchal, but based on the same principle. Store ice underground, where the earth's natural coolness will help preserve it. Workers dig a large pit, perhaps 20 feet across and 15 feet deep, the sides carefully shaped and reinforced with stone walls to prevent collapse. Drainage channels are carved at the bottom, leading away from the pit so melt water won't pool. Above, a conical roof is constructed from timber and thatch, overhanging the pit's edges to shade it from sun. Winter comes, and slaves fill the pit with snow from nearby hills, layer after layer, packing it down, adding insulation of straw or leaves between layers. By late winter, the pit is full, perhaps 30 or 40 tons of snow compressed into ice. The opening is covered with wooden boards, then piled with straw, then sealed with earth. The roof keeps off rain and sun. Through spring and into summer, the villa's occupants use this ice sparingly, carefully, knowing it must last. A servant might be sent once a week to open the pit, descend on a ladder, chip off a basketful of ice, and bring it up. Each time warm air enters, accelerating the melt, so visits are minimized. The ice might last until July, sometimes August, if the winter was cold and the summer mild. Ancient China. You find yourself now on the opposite side of the world, in northern China, standing beside a frozen lake in winter, sometime around 1000 BCE. The lake is vast, its surface frozen solid, covered with a layer of snow that sparkles under weak winter sun. The temperature is well below freezing, the air still and crisp, the silence profound. This is an imperial ice harvest. The ice from this lake belongs to the emperor, reserved for the court, and its collection is a matter of ritual and ceremony as much as practical necessity. You watch as officials in silk robes observe while workers in padded cotton jackets begin the harvest. The process is more organized than the Roman snow gathering, more formal than the Persian ice harvest. First ritual, a court official reads a proclamation announcing the harvest, giving thanks to heaven for the cold weather that has frozen the water. Incense is burned, prayers offered. Only then does the work begin. Workers sweep snow from a section of ice, revealing the clear surface beneath. You can see down through the ice to the dark water below, plants suspended in the frozen water like fossils in amber. The ice is thick here, 18 inches or more, hard as stone. The cutting begins. Workers use iron-toothed saws, long two-person saws that require synchronized effort. Two men position themselves on either side of a marked line, the saw between them, and begin the rhythmic pull and push, the teeth biting into ice, the screech echoing across the frozen lake. Ice dust flies with each stroke, sparkling in the sunlight, coating the workers' jackets with white powder. The saw cuts slowly, perhaps an inch per minute, the workers' breath coming harder as they work. Other teams work parallel lines, creating a grid pattern. After an hour, the first section is free, a massive rectangular block, perhaps 4 feet by 3 feet by 18 inches thick, weighing several £100. Workers use long poles with iron hooks to manoeuvre the block, sliding it across the ice toward shore. More blocks follow, one by one, the ice field gradually carved into sections, the dark water visible in the channels between cuts. This is cold, exhausting work, the same motions repeated hundreds of times, backs bending, arms pulling, hands numbing despite thick gloves. Workers rotate frequently, working for 20 minutes, then warming by fires on the shore, then returning to the ice. At the shore, the blocks are loaded onto wooden sledges, each sledge holding one massive block, pulled by teams of men. No animals, as this is imperial ice, and must not be contaminated. The sledges are dragged up the bank, across frozen ground, toward the ice house that stands perhaps a quarter mile from the lake. The imperial ice house is an impressive structure, half buried in the earth, with thick walls of rammed earth and a heavy timber roof covered with thatch and clay tiles. The interior is vast, dim, cold, its floor covered with layers of rice husks. The empty shells left after rice is milled, excellent insulation that also absorbs moisture. Workers manoeuvre each ice block inside, positioning it carefully on the rice husk floor, leaving narrow gaps between blocks for air circulation. More rice husks are poured into the gaps, covering the tops of the blocks, creating a uniform layer. The next level of ice blocks is laid on top of this, and the process repeats, layer after layer, ice and rice husks, building upward until the chamber is nearly full. An ice master oversees everything, keeping careful records, how many blocks, the thickness of ice, the date of harvest, the expected duration. These records will be presented to court officials, who will calculate whether the harvest is sufficient for the summer's needs. If not, another harvest must be organised quickly before the ice begins to thin as spring approaches. You find yourself months later, in the height of summer, standing in the imperial palace in the Forbidden City. The heat is oppressive, humidity thick, the air still and heavy. But in certain chambers, ice from the winter harvest provides relief. A servant enters a room carrying a large bronze basin filled with chunks of ice, placing it in the centre of the chamber. The ice radiates cold, and the air around it begins to circulate, cool air sinking and spreading outward, warm air rising. The effect is subtle but noticeable. The room temperature drops several degrees, enough to make the heat bearable. Other servants bring more ice, placing basins in corners, creating pools of coolness. The emperor and his court can retreat to these cool chambers during the hottest part of the day, a privilege that reinforces their status, a demonstration of imperial power over nature itself. Meanwhile, in the ice house outside the city, workers monitor the remaining supply carefully. The master checks daily, descending into the dim chamber, examining the ice for signs of excessive melting, adjusting ventilation, adding more rice husk insulation where needed. By late summer, perhaps half the original harvest remains. By autumn, only a quarter. The supply must last until the lakes freeze again. Medieval darkness. Centuries pass, empires rise and fall, and you find yourself now in medieval Europe, standing in the north of France around the year 1200 CE. Here the techniques of ancient Persia and Rome and China are unknown or forgotten. Most people have never heard of ice houses, never conceived of storing winter cold through summer heat. Instead, they rely on simpler, more humble methods. Imagine you're a peasant woman, and it's late November. The autumn harvest is finished, the fields empty except for stubble, the sky low and grey with approaching winter. You've spent the past weeks preparing food for storage, and now you descend the narrow stone steps into your family's root cellar. The cellar is small, perhaps 10 feet square, dug beneath the stone foundation of your cottage, its walls lined with rough-cut stones, mortared with mud and clay. The ceiling is low. You must stoop slightly, supported by thick oak beams blackened with age. The floor is bare earth, hard-packed and damp, with a slight slope toward one corner where water seeps through the stones and drains away. You carry a tallow candle, its flame small and flickering, barely illuminating the space. The smell is thick. Earth and mould, damp stone, the organic decay of stored vegetables, the musty odour of places that never see sun. The temperature is noticeably cooler than above, perhaps 50 degrees even in summer, dropping to near freezing in winter. Shelves line the walls, rough planks laid across stones. On these shelves you've arranged your winter stores. Turnips and carrots layered in boxes of sand. The sand keeps them from touching each other, prevents rot from spreading, maintains slight moisture. Cabbages hung by their roots from ceiling hooks, slowly drying into a preserved state. Onions and garlic braided into long strings that drape like vegetable curtains. Apples, individually wrapped in cloth and laid in rows, each one checked for bruises before storage, because one rotting apple will spoil all its neighbours. In the corner stand barrels, one of salted pork, the meat packed in brine, that must be maintained through winter. You check this regularly, skimming the surface, adding salt as needed, ensuring the meat stays submerged, because any piece exposed to air will spoil. Another barrel holds dried peas, another dried beans, staples that will carry you through the lean months. Clay pots hold other treasures, preserved fruit, apples or plums cooked with honey and sealed with wax, the wax cracked slightly from temperature changes, but still intact. Cheese wrapped in cloth and coated with wax, aging slowly in the cool darkness. A precious wheel of hard cheese that might last until spring if rationed carefully. You perform your daily ritual, checking each item, running hands over the vegetables in their sand, removing any that show signs of rot, turning the apples, examining the onions for soft spots. This is essential. Rot spreads quickly in confined spaces, and vigilance is the only defence. One bad turnip found and removed today might save 20 turnips tomorrow. The work is cold. Your fingers grow numb touching the damp sand and cool vegetables. The candle flame provides no warmth, only light. You work quickly, efficiently, knowing every item here represents your family's survival. This food must last until spring, until the first greens can be gathered from the fields, until the chickens begin laying again after their winter pause. You ascend back into the cottage, closing the heavy wooden hatch that covers the cellar entrance, sealing in the cool air below. Above, the cottage is warmer, heated by the cooking fire, but that warmth is the enemy of food preservation. The cellar, cool and dark and damp, is where food survives. But there are limitations. By March, most of the vegetables are gone, consumed or rotted. The apples are wrinkled, their flesh soft and mealy, but still edible. The salted pork is nearly exhausted, the brine cloudy and strong-smelling. By April, you're scraping the bottom of the barrels, eating the last sprouting onions, the shriveled carrots, grateful for anything. This is the starving time. Late winter into early spring, when stored food runs out and new food hasn't yet grown. Families lose weight, children become listless, the old and weak sicken and sometimes die. Everyone waits desperately for the first wild greens to emerge, for dandelion leaves and young nettles that can be cooked into bitter but nourishing soups. And there's no ice, no cooling, no refrigeration beyond the natural coolness of the earth itself. Meat must be eaten fresh or preserved by salting, smoking, drying. Milk sours within hours in summer, so it's immediately made into cheese or butter or consumed at once. Fish caught in summer must be salted or smoked the same day, or it rots. Fruit ripens all at once in autumn and must be preserved immediately, dried, cooked into preserves, or simply eaten in vast quantities while available, because there's no way to keep it fresh. You find yourself now at a monastery in Germany in the year 1350. Monasteries, with their larger resources and organisation, can build better storage. You descend into the monastery's cellar, far larger and more elaborate than a peasant's root cellar. This space extends beneath the entire monastery building, a warren of stone chambers, vaulted ceilings, thick walls. Different chambers serve different purposes. One holds barrels of beer. The monks brew constantly, as beer is safer to drink than water and provides nutrition. The beer ages slowly in the cool darkness, yeast settling, flavours mellowing. Another chamber stores grain, heaps of wheat and rye and barley, representing the monastery's wealth and security. Rats are the enemy here. You can see evidence of their presence, droppings in corners, gnawed husks. But the monks keep cats and poison and wage constant war against the rodents. A third chamber holds preserved foods, similar to a peasant's stores but on a grander scale. Hundreds of apples, thousands of onions, barrels of salted fish and meat, wheels of cheese aging on wooden racks. The monastery has an advantage. The brothers can dedicate time to food preservation, can experiment with techniques, can afford salt and honey for preservation, can build elaborate storage that peasants cannot. But even here, with all these advantages, there's no refrigeration, no ice, no cold storage beyond what the earth naturally provides. Summer heat still spoils food, meat still rots, milk still sours. The fundamental problem remains unsolved, and will remain unsolved for centuries more. The little ice age time moves forward. Europe grows colder. You find yourself now in England in the year 1650, during the Little Ice Age, a period of unusual cold that will last until the mid-1800s. The Thames River freezes solid in winter, frost fairs held on the ice, oxen roasted over fires built on the frozen surface. This cold brings hardship, crops fail, people freeze, famines sweep across the continent. But it also brings opportunity. Ice and snow are now abundant, even in southern regions, and the wealthy begin to exploit this. You find yourself on a country estate, watching the construction of an ice house. This is England's answer to the Persian yakchal, adapted to the wetter, cooler climate, but based on the same principles. Store winter ice underground, insulate it carefully, use it through summer. The ice house is being built into a hillside, taking advantage of natural insulation. Workers have excavated a large chamber, egg-shaped, perhaps 15 feet across and 20 feet deep. The walls lined with brick, built without mortar, so that meltwater can drain through the gaps. The floor slopes toward a central drain that leads outside the hill, carrying away water that would otherwise pool and warm the remaining ice. Above, a domed brick roof is being constructed, arching over the chamber, designed to shed rain and provide additional insulation. The entrance is a long, narrow tunnel, angled downward, with multiple doors, each door another barrier against warm air. The design ensures that cold air, being heavier, stays in the chamber while warm air cannot easily enter. Winter arrives, and you watch the first ice harvest from the estate's ornamental lake. The lake has frozen solid, ice perhaps 8 inches thick, and the estate's workers gather for the harvest. This is lighter work than in ancient China. The ice is thinner, easier to cut, and these are not slaves but employed workers, cold and tired, but at least paid for their labour. They use ice saws, long serrated blades with handles at each end, 2 men per saw. The technique is the same as ancient times. Mark a grid pattern on the ice, saw along the lines, separate the blocks, slide them to shore. But there's more organisation here, more efficiency. One team cuts, another team transports, a third team packs the ice house. The work proceeds steadily through the cold January day. Each ice block is perhaps 2 feet by 3 feet, weighing 100 pounds or more. Workers use iron tongs to grip the blocks, carrying them in pairs to the ice house entrance. Inside the chamber, other workers receive the blocks, stacking them carefully, filling the gaps between blocks with straw brought from the estate's barns. The straw serves multiple purposes: insulation, moisture absorption, and protection. As ice melts slightly at contact points, the straw absorbs the water and prevents blocks from freezing together into a solid mass that would be difficult to break apart when needed. The straw also creates thousands of tiny air pockets, and air is an excellent insulator. Layer by layer, the chamber fills with ice and straw, building upward from the floor. The workers move in practiced rhythm, passing blocks hand to hand, positioning them, spreading straw, compressing it slightly, adding the next layer. The work is cold, fingers go numb, toes ache in leather boots, noses run constantly. But it's also satisfying physical labour with visible progress. By evening the chamber is full, perhaps 20 tons of ice packed tight. The workers exit, and the entrance is sealed. First a heavy wooden door at the chamber entrance, then straw packed into the tunnel, then a second door halfway up the tunnel, more straw, finally a third door at the tunnel entrance, this one fitted with a lock. Ice is valuable, and theft is a concern. You find yourself now on a hot summer day, July, standing in the estate kitchen. The cook has sent a kitchen boy to fetch ice. The boy returns from the ice house carrying a large wooden bucket filled with chunks of ice, water dripping from the bottom as he walks. The cook receives the ice and immediately begins using it. Some goes into a wooden box designed for cooling. A primitive ice box, really just an insulated wooden chest, with the ice in one compartment and food in another, the cold air circulating naturally. A joint of meat goes into this box, and the cook knows it will last 2 or 3 days instead of 1, a significant extension in a world where spoilage is constant. More ice is shaved into fine pieces and added to a large bowl where fresh cream, sugar, and fruit are being mixed. The bowl sits in a larger bowl filled with ice and salt. The salt lowers the freezing point of the ice, making it colder, and the cream mixture is stirred constantly as it chills and thickens. After half an hour of stirring, the mixture has frozen into a crude ice cream, which will be served at dinner as a spectacular dessert. The remainder of the ice goes into a jug of beer, cooling it from room temperature to a refreshing coldness. The estate's lord drinks his beer cold now, a luxury his grandfather never knew, and he considers it a mark of sophistication, a sign of his estate's modernity and his own refined taste. But the ice is finite, the ice house is checked weekly, and the estate steward records the remaining quantity, calculating whether the supply will last through summer. A warm summer means faster melting, and the supply might run out by August. A cool summer means the ice lasts longer, perhaps into September. There's always anxiety. Will it last? Can we afford to use more? Should we ration more carefully? By late summer, the ice chamber is perhaps half empty, the remaining blocks sitting in damp straw, slowly shrinking, dripping steadily into the drain. The quality has declined. The ice is no longer clear and clean, but cloudy and permeated with straw fragments. But it's still cold, still functional, still precious. Time moves forward. The ice houses of English estates work well enough, but they're limited, dependent on winter freezing, on local ponds and lakes, on the unpredictability of seasons. But across the Atlantic Ocean, in the young United States, someone is dreaming of something larger, more ambitious, almost absurd. You find yourself now on the shore of a frozen lake near Boston, Massachusetts, on a bitter February morning in 1806. the Ice King. The temperature is 5 degrees below zero. Your breath freezes instantly into ice crystals that drift in front of your face. The lake stretches before you, frozen solid, the ice thick and clear, perhaps 18 inches deep. Snow has been swept from a large section, revealing the dark ice beneath, and you can see down through it to shadows of weeds suspended in frozen stillness. A young man stands on the shore, watching workers prepare for the harvest. His name is Frederick Tudor, though history will call him the Ice King, and he's about to attempt something most people consider madness, shipping ice from Massachusetts to the Caribbean, to Martinique, where it never freezes, where most people have never seen ice, where the very concept of frozen water seems like fantasy. The workers are skeptical but paid, and they follow instructions. They're using techniques adapted from local ice harvesting for estate ice houses, but on a larger scale. First, they've cleared the snow from nearly an acre of lake surface. Now they're scoring the ice using a horse-drawn ice plough, a heavy frame with metal teeth that cut shallow grooves in the ice surface, creating a grid pattern. You watch as the horse plods forward, the plough teeth screeching against ice, leaving parallel grooves 8 inches apart. The horse turns, and another pass creates grooves perpendicular to the first. The ice is now divided into a checkerboard of squares, each one scored perhaps an inch deep. This makes the sawing easier. The saws will follow these grooves like railroad tracks. The actual cutting begins. Men work in pairs with long ice saws, standing on either side of a scored line. The saws are 5 feet long with large teeth, and they require rhythm and coordination. One man pulls, then the other back and forth, the saw biting deeper with each stroke. Ice dust fountains up, coating the men's clothes with white powder that sparkles in the weak sunlight. The sound is constant, the rasp and screech of multiple saws working simultaneously, the crack as scored sections begin to separate, the shouts of men coordinating their efforts, the snort and stamp of horses waiting with sledges. Your ears ache from the cold, and the sound seems sharper, clearer in the freezing air. A section breaks free, a rectangular block perhaps 2 feet by 3 feet by 18 inches thick. Workers use long poles with iron hooks called pike poles to maneuver the block through the water channel that's been maintained open, floating it toward shore. More blocks follow, sliding through the dark water, bumping against each other with solid thunks, accumulating at the shore like a geometric harvest. At the landing, workers use iron tongs, large pincers that grip the ice blocks, to lift them from the water onto wooden sledges. The blocks weigh 200 pounds or more, and lifting requires strength and technique. 2 men per block, grunting with effort, their backs straining, boots slipping on ice-slicked planks. The blocks are positioned on sledges, and horses drag them up the bank to the ice house. Tudor's ice house is enormous compared to estate ice houses, a wooden structure 3 stories tall, perhaps 60 feet on each side, its walls double layered with a foot of sawdust insulation packed between inner and outer boards. Inside, the space is dim and vast, and workers are stacking ice blocks in precise arrangements. The blocks are laid in rows, fitted tightly together like stone masonry, with sawdust spread between each layer. Sawdust from local lumber mills is abundant and cheap, and it insulates better than straw, absorbs moisture well, and packs into every gap and crevice. The work is cold and repetitive. Lift a block, position it, check alignment, spread sawdust, compress it, lift the next block. The men work in shifts, 20 minutes inside the ice house, then 10 minutes warming by fires outside, then back inside. Without these breaks, the cold would be dangerous, frostbite and exhaustion taking their toll. By evening, perhaps 20 tons of ice have been harvested and stored. This will continue daily, weather permitting, through January and February, until the ice house holds hundreds of tons. But Tudor's plan requires more than storage. He needs to ship this ice to Martinique across 1,000 miles of increasingly warm water and deliver it still frozen. You find yourself now aboard a ship in Boston Harbour, watching ice being loaded. The ship's hold has been prepared like a giant icebox, wooden partitions creating an insulated chamber, the walls lined with hay and sawdust. Workers carry ice blocks down the gangplank through the hold, stacking them in the insulated chamber, packing sawdust between each block, building a solid mass of ice that fills the entire space. The loading takes days. Each block must be positioned carefully. The insulation must be perfect. The sawdust packed tight. The ship sits lower in the water as tons of ice accumulate below deck. Finally, the hold is full, the hatches sealed and covered with more insulation, and the ship departs, sailing south toward the tropics. You don't follow this voyage. It will take weeks, and the ice will melt steadily, perhaps 30% lost to the Caribbean heat. But enough will arrive frozen to make the venture profitable. Barely. Tudor will lose money on early voyages, face bankruptcy, persist stubbornly, and gradually refine his methods. Other entrepreneurs will copy his idea, compete for markets, innovate and improve. The ice trade expands. Decades pass. You find yourself now on the same Massachusetts lake, but the year is 1850 and everything has changed. The ice harvest is no longer a small operation with a few workers and simple tools. It's an industry, employing thousands, processing hundreds of thousands of tons of ice annually, shipping to ports around the world. The lake is divided into sections, each one assigned to a different crew. The sections are enormous, some covering 10 or 20 acres. The tools have improved. Ice ploughs are heavier, pulled by multiple horses, cutting deeper grooves faster. Ice saws are mechanized, horse-powered rotary saws mounted on sleds, their circular blades spinning and biting into ice, cutting channels far faster than hand saws ever could. You watch one of these machines at work. The horses strain against their harnesses, pulling the sled forward. The circular saw, powered by gears connected to the sled's wheels, spins rapidly, throwing ice chips high into the air where they sparkle and drift like snow. The blade cuts a channel perhaps 6 inches wide and 18 inches deep, moving at walking speed, far faster than 2 men with a handsaw. The sound is a continuous high-pitched screech, the blade hitting occasional pockets of trapped air that explode with sharp cracks. Behind the saw, workers use pike poles to separate the ice blocks and float them toward the channel leading to shore. The channel is a long, straight cut through the ice, perhaps 50 feet wide, maintained open by constant movement and by the slight warmth of the water below. Ice blocks float through this channel in long processions, hundreds of blocks in single file, guided by workers with poles, moving toward the ice elevator at the shore. The ice elevator is an innovation that has transformed the work. Instead of manually lifting each block from the water, the elevator does it mechanically. The device is a long inclined conveyor, powered by a horse walking in circles, turning a gear system that moves an endless chain of hooks and platforms. Ice blocks are positioned on the platforms in the water, and the chain carries them up the incline, lifting them 20 feet to the loading platform, water streaming from the rising blocks, freezing into icicles on the chain. At the top, workers guide blocks off the elevator onto wagons or directly into the ice house through large doors. The efficiency is remarkable. The elevator can lift several hundred blocks per hour, work that would have required dozens of men manually lifting. The workers here do different jobs now, positioning blocks on the elevator, guiding them at the top, but not exhausting themselves with constant lifting. You walk to one of the ice houses. These structures are enormous now, some holding 10,000 tons, others even larger. They dominate the shoreline, massive wooden buildings 4 and 5 stories tall, their double walls packed with sawdust. their foundations built on stone to prevent ground warmth from rising into the storage areas. Inside, the scale is overwhelming. The space extends upward into darkness, the ceiling lost in shadows, the walls barely visible in the dim light from small windows. The ice is stacked in solid blocks from floor to ceiling, each level perhaps 12 feet high, with walkways and platforms at different heights allowing access. The sawdust insulation between levels is a foot thick, more at the walls. The smell is distinctive, damp sawdust, cold, the faint mineral smell of lake water frozen into ice. The temperature inside is perhaps 20 degrees, cold enough that your breath clouds, cold enough that exposed skin begins to ache within minutes. Workers here wear heavy coats, wool scarves wrapped around faces, leather gloves, felt boots. They work in short shifts, 15 or 20 minutes inside, then warming by fires outside. The work is less physically demanding than the harvest, mostly checking ice quality, removing sections for shipment, adding sawdust as needed, but the constant cold is draining, exhausting in a different way. You find yourself now among the workers and you begin to understand their lives. Most are immigrants, Irish men who fled famine in the 1840s, French-Canadian men from Quebec, drawn south by wages. They live in boarding houses near the lakes, rough wooden buildings with shared rooms, 6 or 8 men per room, sleeping in double-bunked beds, the rooms heated by wood stoves that make the air smoky and dry. They wake before dawn in winter darkness, dress in multiple layers, eat breakfast of porridge and salt pork at long communal tables, then walk to the lake through knee-deep snow, arriving as the sky begins to lighten. Work starts immediately, no delays, no warm-up period, just straight into the brutal cold and hard labour. The work is dangerous. Men slip on ice, fall into open water channels, suffer frostbite, break bones when ice blocks shift or fall. The ice companies provide minimal care, a warming shed, a few bandages, but no compensation for injuries, no insurance. A man injured badly enough that he can't work is simply dismissed, left to find his own way home or to the charity hospital. The pay is modest, perhaps $2 per day in the harvest season, work available only in winter. The men save what they can, sending money to families still in Ireland or Canada, or saving to bring wives and children over to America. Summer brings different work, loading ships, warehouse labour, construction, enough to survive but not to prosper. At midday, work pauses briefly for lunch. The men gather in warming sheds, buildings with large stoves burning constantly. They eat food brought from the boarding houses, bread, cheese, apples, sometimes cold meat. They warm their hands at the stoves, feeling returning to numb fingers, accompanied by sharp, painful tingling. Steam rises from wet wool as clothes dry. The men talk little, too tired, too cold, but there's camaraderie in shared hardship. The afternoon continues the morning's work. By 3 or 4, winter darkness is falling again. The work slows, becomes more dangerous in dim light, and finally stops. The men trudge back to boarding houses, eat dinner, more porridge, beans, occasionally beef stew, and collapse into bed, asleep almost instantly. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after. For weeks through January and February, until the ice harvest is complete, or until warmer weather makes the ice too thin and dangerous. Ice across the world. You find yourself now on a dock in Calcutta, India, on a scorching afternoon in 1855. The temperature is well over 100 degrees, the humidity thick and oppressive, the air shimmering with heat. And onto this dock, workers are unloading blocks of ice from a ship that has sailed from Boston, a voyage of 4 months around Africa through tropical seas. The ship's hold is opened, releasing a breath of cold air that briefly cools the faces of men standing nearby before dissipating in the heat. Inside the hold, perhaps 40% of the original ice cargo has melted during the voyage, but 60% remains, several 100 tons of ice, still solid, still cold, a cargo worth a fortune in this climate. Workers, Indians hired for the unloading, descend into the hold. They're shocked by the cold, having never experienced such temperatures, and they work quickly, eager to escape the uncomfortable chill. They use tongs to grip the blocks, lift them, pass them up chain gang style to the dock, where other workers load them onto carts insulated with straw. The ice is rushed to storage warehouses, buildings designed like giant ice boxes with thick walls, minimal windows, insulated doors. Inside these warehouses, the ice is restacked with fresh insulation, packed tight, and held until sold. Even here in Calcutta's heat, with proper storage, ice can last weeks, slowly melting but available for sale the entire time. You watch as a wealthy Indian merchant purchases a block of ice. It's wrapped in burlap and straw, loaded onto a cart, and taken to his home, where servants place it in a specially built ice chest. The merchant uses it to cool drinks, to create chilled desserts, to demonstrate his wealth and sophistication. Ice in India is a luxury item, expensive, reserved for the wealthy, but it's become fashionable, a status symbol, a sign of connection to global trade and Western modernity. Ice shops open in major cities, Calcutta, Bombay, Madras. These shops keep ice in insulated storage rooms and sell it by the pound to whoever can afford it. Hospitals buy ice to reduce fevers, to preserve medications. Hotels use it to cool drinks for European guests. The British colonial administration keeps ice houses at government buildings, considering cold drinks essential to maintaining British standards in tropical postings. But the ice trade faces competition. In the southern United States, particularly in Louisiana and Texas, ice harvests are impossible. Winters are too warm. These regions must import ice from the north at great expense or do without, but this creates opportunity for a different approach. Machines that make cold. You find yourself now in a brick building in New Orleans in 1870, standing inside what's called an ice factory, a building where ice is manufactured mechanically, without harvesting frozen lakes, without depending on winter's cold. The air is thick with the acrid smell of ammonia, sharp and unpleasant, making your eyes water. The centerpiece of the factory is the refrigeration machine, an enormous contraption of iron pipes, brass valves, cast iron cylinders, all connected in a complex arrangement that fills half the building. At its heart is a steam engine, its piston rising and falling rhythmically, powering a compressor that pumps ammonia gas through the system. The process is invisible, but can be explained. Ammonia gas is compressed, which makes it hot. The hot gas flows through pipes immersed in cooling water, giving up its heat, condensing into liquid ammonia. This liquid then flows into expansion chambers where the pressure is released, causing the ammonia to evaporate back into gas, and this evaporation absorbs heat, making the ammonia extremely cold, well below freezing. The cold ammonia gas flows through pipes immersed in brine tanks, cooling the brine to below the freezing point of water. You walk to one of the brine tanks. It's a large rectangular vessel, perhaps 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, 4 feet deep, filled with brine. Salt water that remains liquid even at temperatures below 32 degrees. The brine is so cold it steams slightly when exposed to the warmer factory air, condensation forming immediately on the metal sides of the tank. Suspended in the brine are metal moulds, each one a rectangular can, perhaps 18 inches by 12 inches by 10 inches deep. These moulds contain fresh water, and the cold brine surrounding them is freezing that water into ice. The process takes about 24 hours. The water doesn't freeze instantly but slowly, from the outside inward, crystals forming gradually, growing until the entire mould's contents are solid ice. Workers check the moulds regularly, tapping them with hammers to judge by sound whether the ice is fully frozen. When ready, they use a small crane to lift a mould from the brine, water streaming from its surface, frost forming immediately as the wet metal meets the warmer air. The mould is carried to a dipping tank, a vat of slightly warm water, and immersed briefly. This melts the thin layer of ice in contact with the metal, allowing the ice block to slide out when the mould is inverted. The ice block tumbles out, landing on a wooden platform with a heavy thud. It's perfectly rectangular, smooth-surfaced, clear and pure. It's also heavy, perhaps 200 pounds, and workers use tongs to lift it, carry it to the storage room, a large insulated chamber kept cold by more pipes circulating cold ammonia gas. The blocks are stacked in rows, building inventory that will be sold and delivered throughout the city. The factory operates continuously, day and night. The steam engine must be kept running. Shutting down and restarting is complicated and wastes fuel. The ammonia compressor runs constantly, its rhythmic thump, thump, thump vibrating through the building. The brine tanks maintain their cold, producing batch after batch of ice, perhaps 50 blocks per day from this factory, every day, year-round, regardless of season or weather. Workers tend the machines in shifts. The engineer monitors the steam engine, checks pressures and temperatures, oils bearings, adjusts valves. The fireman feeds coal into the boiler, maintaining steady steam pressure. Other workers manage the ice production, lowering moulds into brine, checking freezing progress, extracting finished blocks, cleaning moulds, refilling them with fresh water, returning them to the brine. The work is hot and cold simultaneously, hot near the steam engine and boiler, cold near the brine tanks and storage room. Workers move between temperature extremes, sweating one moment, shivering the next, their bodies never quite adjusting. The ammonia smell is constant, unavoidable, and workers develop chronic headaches, irritated lungs, watering eyes. Leaks are dangerous. Ammonia gas can suffocate, and workers carry wet cloths to cover their faces if a pipe ruptures. But the factory produces ice regardless of season, and this is revolutionary. New Orleans no longer depends on ice shipped from Boston at enormous expense. The factory ice is cheaper, more reliable, available year-round. Other factories open in southern cities, Houston, Memphis, Atlanta, wherever the climate prevents natural ice harvest. The Iceman cometh. You find yourself now in a city neighbourhood, a working-class district of Philadelphia, on a hot July morning in 1905. The streets are lined with brick row houses, their front steps scrubbed clean, windows open to catch any breeze. An ice wagon moves slowly down the street, pulled by a tired horse, its hooves clopping on cobblestones. The wagon is specially built for ice delivery. The bed is a large wooden box, insulated with sawdust between double walls, fitted with a hinged lid. Inside, blocks of ice nestle in wet sawdust, melting slowly in the summer heat, water dripping from the wagon's undercarriage, leaving a dark trail on the street. The Iceman is a familiar figure in the neighbourhood, making his rounds 3 times per week in summer, once per week in winter. He knows every family on his route, knows how much ice they buy, knows to check the card in each window, a printed card with numbers on different edges, and whichever edge is placed upward indicates how many pounds of ice the family wants today. 25 pounds, 50 pounds, 75 pounds, 100 pounds. You watch him work. At one house the card shows 50 pounds. The Iceman stops his wagon, climbs down, opens the wagon's lid. Inside, the ice blocks are 200 pounds each. He uses an ice pick to score a block, then an ice saw to cut it. Quick practice strokes, sawing through the block in less than a minute. The 50-pound piece separates, and he grips it with his ice tongs, lifts it onto his shoulder, the cold seeping through the leather pad he wears, water dripping down his back. He walks to the house, up the front steps, through the door that's been left unlocked. The Iceman is trusted, a regular presence, almost like family. He walks through the front hall to the kitchen, where the icebox waits. The icebox is a wooden cabinet, perhaps 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide, lined inside with zinc, insulated with cork. It has 2 compartments, the upper for ice, the lower for food, separated by a metal shelf that conducts cold downward. The housewife has emptied the drip pan from beneath the icebox and cleared the ice compartment. The Iceman lifts the lid, positions the new block of ice inside, settles it firmly, and closes the lid. Water from the melting ice will drip through a small hole at the bottom of the compartment, down through a pipe into the drip pan below, and the housewife will empty this pan daily, sometimes twice daily in hot weather. The Iceman nods to the housewife, marks her payment in his account book. Most customers pay weekly or monthly rather than per delivery, and returns to his wagon. The next house, the next delivery, the same routine repeated 20 or 30 times per day, 6 days per week, week after week. His shoulder is permanently calloused from carrying ice. His back aches constantly. His hands are scarred from ice picks and tongs. But it's steady work, and he knows the neighbourhood and their satisfaction in providing a necessary service. You enter one of the houses after the Iceman leaves, standing in the kitchen with the housewife as she reorganises her icebox. She opens the lower compartment, the food storage area, and you see the contents. A bottle of milk, kept cold so it doesn't sour as quickly. A covered dish with leftover roast beef from last night's dinner. A bowl of butter, softened but not melted. Fresh vegetables in a lower drawer, lettuce, carrots, radishes that will stay crisp for several days instead of wilting within hours. She checks the ice compartment, gauging how much ice remains from the previous delivery. Perhaps 20 pounds of the original 50 are still there, melting steadily, providing cold for another day or 2. By then, the Iceman will return with a fresh delivery. This rhythm governs food storage, plan meals around ice delivery, buy fresh meat only on delivery days, use up leftovers before they spoil despite the cold. The drip pan beneath the icebox holds perhaps a quart of water. She carries it carefully to the sink, pours it out, replaces the pan. This is done every morning, sometimes every evening too if the weather is particularly hot. Forgetting to empty the drip pan is a disaster. The water overflows onto the floor, soaking into the wood, creating puddles, damaging the kitchen. The icebox requires other maintenance. Once a week she empties it completely, wipes down the zinc lining with a solution of baking soda and water, scrubs away any spills or spots that might harbour mould or bacteria. The drip pan is washed with soap and hot water. The rubber gasket around the door is checked for wear. A loose gasket lets warm air in, makes the ice melt faster. These routines are as regular as washing dishes or sweeping floors, part of the rhythm of housekeeping. But there are frustrations. The icebox is never quite cold enough. The temperature fluctuates as ice melts. The top shelf near the ice is coldest, perhaps 40 degrees. The bottom is warmer, perhaps 55 degrees. There's no precise control, no way to maintain exact temperatures. Food still spoils, just more slowly than without ice. Milk still sours after a few days. Meat still turns if kept too long. And there's the dependency on the Iceman. If he's late, if he forgets a delivery, if the ice factory has problems and can't supply enough ice, then households suffer. In winter, ice delivery is less frequent, and families rely more on keeping food on cold porches or in unheated cellars. But in summer, the Iceman is essential, and his reliability, or lack of it, directly affects daily life. The electric revolution begins. You find yourself now in a different kitchen in a suburb of Detroit in the year 1926. This kitchen looks similar to the one you just left. White-painted wooden cabinets, a porcelain sink, a gas stove, but there's something different, something new and slightly strange standing against one wall. It's a refrigerator, an electric refrigerator, one of the first that's practical enough for home use. This particular model is a General Electric monitor top, named for the cylindrical unit mounted on top of the cabinet, resembling the gun turret on the Civil War ironclad USS Monitor. The cabinet itself is white enamelled metal, standing about 5 feet tall, 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep. It has a single door with a chrome handle, and when you open the door, you feel the cold air immediately, steady, reliable, colder than any icebox. The interior is lined with white porcelain with wire shelves that can be adjusted to different heights. There's a freezer compartment at the top, small, but capable of actually freezing food, making ice cubes, keeping ice cream frozen solid. The cylindrical unit on top hums quietly, a sound that's constant but not loud, just a low electrical buzz punctuated by occasional clicks as the thermostat cycles the compressor on and off. Inside that sealed cylinder is the compressor and motor, using sulfur dioxide as a refrigerant, safer than ammonia, but still somewhat toxic if it leaks. The housewife who owns this refrigerator is demonstrating it proudly. She opens the door, showing you the contents. There's more food here than would fit in an icebox, multiple bottles of milk, a roast that's been stored for 3 days and is still fresh, vegetables that are still crisp, butter that's perfectly firm. There's no drip pan to empty, no ice to manage, no iceman to depend on. The refrigerator simply runs, constantly, automatically, maintaining cold without any attention required. She opens the freezer compartment and removes a metal tray divided into squares, an ice cube tray. It's filled with frozen water, and she flexes the metal slightly, breaking the ice loose, and cubes tumble out. Making ice at home, whenever you want, as much as you need, this is still novel enough to be remarkable. But this refrigerator was expensive, $520 when her husband bought it last year, equivalent to several months of his salary as a bank clerk. Many of their neighbours still use ice boxes, considering electric refrigerators an extravagance, a risky new technology that might fail, a waste of money when ice delivery works well enough. But she's delighted with it, freed from the routines of ice management, able to store food longer, to shop less frequently, to plan meals days in advance. The refrigerator isn't perfect. It's noisy by modern standards, the hum and click constant in the kitchen. It uses a substantial amount of electricity, adding noticeably to the monthly electric bill. The freezer compartment accumulates frost that must be defrosted periodically, a process that involves turning off the refrigerator, removing all the food, letting the frost melt, catching the water in pans, wiping everything dry, then turning it back on and waiting for it to cool down again. And there's always the worry about mechanical failure. The compressor is sealed, impossible to repair at home, and if it breaks, a technician must be called, parts ordered, repairs made that might cost substantial money. The refrigerator represents a new kind of appliance, complex, dependent on technology, requiring expertise beyond the homeowner's knowledge. It's a shift from self-sufficiency toward dependence on technical systems and expert repair. But despite these concerns, the electric refrigerator is clearly the future. Production is increasing, prices are slowly falling, and more families are buying them. The ice delivery business is beginning to decline. Some icemen shift to other work, sensing the end of their trade. Ice houses sit partially empty, their inventories unsold, their owners worried about the future. Depression and war. You find yourself now in the same Detroit suburb, but the year is 1935 and the world has changed. The Great Depression has devastated the economy. The bank where the husband worked has failed, and he's now working in an auto factory, grateful to have any job at all. Money is desperately tight. but the refrigerator still runs, humming quietly in the kitchen, a reassuring constant in uncertain times. It's become essential, not a luxury. The ability to keep food fresh for days instead of hours means less waste, and in these hard times, wasting food is unthinkable. Leftovers are carefully stored, every scrap saved and reused. The housewife plans meals meticulously, stretching ingredients, making soup from bones, using every bit of food the family can afford. Refrigerator prices have fallen, newer models cost $200 or less, and manufacturers offer installment payment plans, $10 down and $5 per month, making them accessible to families who carefully budget. The designs have improved. Refrigerators are quieter, more efficient, more reliable. The strange monitor top design has given way to streamlined cabinets with the compressor hidden in the bottom, making the appliance look more like furniture, less like machinery. New features appear. Automatic ice cube makers, multiple shelves, vegetable crisper drawers with humidity control, interior lights that come on when the door opens. The freezer compartment grows larger, capable of holding more than just ice cubes. Frozen vegetables are beginning to appear in stores, a new product that depends entirely on the home freezer for storage. You find yourself watching a salesman demonstrate a refrigerator to a working-class family in 1938. He opens the door, shows the clean white interior, the spacious shelves, the freezer compartment. He explains how much money they'll save by reducing food waste, by being able to buy food in larger quantities when prices are low. He emphasizes the convenience, the modernity, the improvement in quality of life. The family is skeptical. Can they afford it? The salesman shows them the numbers. $10 down today, $5 per month for 36 months. They calculate, discuss in whispers. The wife wants it desperately, tired of depending on the Iceman, attracted by the promise of modernity. The husband worries about the monthly payment, about the electricity cost, about what happens if he loses his job and can't keep up the payments. Finally, they agree. The salesman fills out paperwork, collects the deposit, schedules delivery. Within a week, the refrigerator arrives, carried up the front steps by deliverymen, positioned in the kitchen, plugged in. The motor starts, the refrigerator begins cooling, and the family gathers around it like a shrine, opening and closing the door, marvelling at the cold, imagining how their lives will change. The icebox goes to the curb, and within hours someone else claims it, hauls it away to use or sell. The family's ice delivery is cancelled, and the Iceman crosses them off his route. One more customer lost, one more sign that his business is dying. War comes. You find yourself now in 1943, and the refrigerator factory has converted to war production. The assembly lines that built refrigerators now build aircraft parts. The metal that would have become kitchen appliances now becomes bombers and fighters. New refrigerator production stops almost entirely, and families keep their existing refrigerators running, making repairs, nursing them along, unable to buy replacements. But the war also drives innovation. Military needs require portable refrigeration for medical supplies, for food, for cooling electronics in aircraft. Engineers develop smaller, more efficient compressors, better insulation, new refrigerants. These advances will later be incorporated into post-war home refrigerators, making them better and cheaper. The war ends. Factories convert back to civilian production, and refrigerator manufacturing resumes at enormous scale. Millions of soldiers return home, marry, start families, buy houses in new suburbs being built around every American city. These new homes are designed with modern kitchens, and every kitchen needs a refrigerator. Demand is enormous, unprecedented. You find yourself now in a refrigerator factory in 1948, watching the assembly line. It's organised much like the automobile assembly lines that inspired it, a moving conveyor, workers at fixed stations, each person performing specific tasks as refrigerators move past. The efficiency is remarkable. A bare metal cabinet enters the line, and 90 minutes later, a complete refrigerator rolls off. Compressor installed, insulation fitted, door attached and sealed, interior shelves and fixtures added, electrical wiring completed, exterior painted and polished, ready to be tested, boxed and shipped. The scale of production is staggering. This factory produces 1,000 refrigerators per day, every day, 6 days per week. Other factories across the country produce similar numbers. By the early 1950s, more than half of American households own refrigerators. By 1960, more than 90%. The refrigerator has become standard, expected, essential, as much a part of a home as a sink or a stove. The modern kitchen. You find yourself now in a typical American kitchen in 1955. The refrigerator dominates one wall, larger than earlier models, perhaps 7 feet tall, with a freezer compartment that's a separate section, divided by a metal partition with its own door. This is a 2-door refrigerator, refrigerator below and freezer above, or side by side in more expensive models. The exterior is white enamel, smooth and clean, with chrome handles that gleam. The door seals with a magnetic gasket, a recent innovation that makes the seal much tighter than the old latch-style closures. Inside, the shelves are adjustable, covered with easy clean material that wipes down easily. There are specialised compartments, a butter keeper, an egg holder, a meat drawer, vegetable crispers with humidity controls. The freezer section is much larger than in earlier refrigerators, capable of holding dozens of packages of frozen food. And frozen food has exploded in variety. You open the freezer and see packages of frozen peas, corn, green beans, spinach, frozen fish sticks, frozen chicken pot pies, frozen orange juice concentrate, frozen dinners, complete meals on aluminum trays, designed to be heated in the oven. TV dinners, they're called, named because you can eat them while watching television. The housewife no longer shops daily, she shops once per week, sometimes less, buying larger quantities, storing everything in the refrigerator and freezer. This changes meal planning, changes cooking, changes the rhythm of domestic life. There's less time pressure, less urgency, more flexibility. If plans change, if someone comes home late, food doesn't spoil. It simply waits in cold storage. The refrigerator runs constantly, so constantly that its hum becomes inaudible, noticed only when it stops. The compressor cycles on and off, maintaining temperature automatically, controlled by a thermostat that the user can adjust with a dial. Colder, warmer, perfect control with just a turn of the dial. The defrosting problem has been solved in newer models, automatic defrost systems that periodically warm the freezer slightly, melt accumulated frost, drain the water away, then return to freezing, all without the user doing anything. You watch a family's evening routine. The father arrives home from work, loosens his tie, goes to the refrigerator, opens the door. The interior light comes on, illuminating the contents. He stands there, the cold air flowing past him into the warm kitchen, scanning the shelves, deciding what he wants. Finally, he takes a bottle of beer, opens it with a bottle opener mounted on the refrigerator's side, drinks. The door closes, the light goes out, the cold is sealed back inside. Later, the mother prepares dinner. She opens the freezer, removes packages of frozen vegetables, drops them into boiling water. She takes leftovers from the refrigerator, meatloaf from 2 nights ago, still fresh, and reheats it. She makes a salad with lettuce from the crisper drawer, crisp and cold. Dinner is ready in 30 minutes, much of it prepared from stored food that would have been impossible to keep fresh without refrigeration. After dinner, leftovers go back into the refrigerator. The dishes are washed. the kitchen is cleaned, and the refrigerator continues its quiet work maintaining cold, preserving food, running through the night while the family sleeps, running through the next day while the house is empty, running constantly, reliably, invisibly, taken entirely for granted. Time moves forward again. The home refrigerator has become ordinary, invisible in its ubiquity. But refrigeration's story extends far beyond individual kitchens. You find yourself now in a place most people never see. The vast infrastructure of cold that feeds modern cities, the cold chain that stretches from farms to tables, an unbroken sequence of refrigeration spanning continents. The cold chain. Imagine you are standing in a field in California's Central Valley on an autumn morning in 1975. The sun is just rising over distant mountains, the air still cool from the night. Around you, lettuce plants stretch in perfectly straight rows toward the horizon, thousands upon thousands of heads of lettuce, ready for harvest. Workers move through the rows, bent at the waist, cutting heads with quick knife strokes, tossing them into wooden crates carried by others. The work is fast, efficient, practiced. Each worker cuts hundreds of heads per hour, moving steadily down the rows. The lettuce must be harvested early, before the sun heats it, because heat is now the enemy. At the edge of the field stands a refrigerated trailer, a portable cold room powered by a diesel generator. As crates of lettuce are filled, they are carried to this trailer and stacked inside, where the temperature is held at 34 degrees. The lettuce begins cooling immediately, its internal temperature dropping, its metabolism slowing, the wilting process delayed. By mid-morning, the trailer is full, holding perhaps 3 tons of lettuce. A truck arrives, backs up to the trailer, and the crates are transferred to the truck's refrigerated cargo box. This truck is a reefer, a refrigerated truck, its cargo area insulated and cooled by a refrigeration unit mounted at the front, powered by its own diesel engine. The unit hums constantly, blowing cold air through ducts that run the length of the cargo area, maintaining temperature regardless of outside conditions. You ride with the truck as it drives away from the fields, joining Highway 99, heading north. The refrigeration unit runs continuously, its compressor cycling, its fans whirring, maintaining the lettuce at the perfect temperature. The driver monitors a gauge on the dashboard showing cargo temperature, and if it rises even a few degrees, he knows something is wrong. A malfunction that could spoil thousands of dollars of produce within hours. The truck drives through the day and into the night, covering 500 miles, arriving at a distribution center outside Portland, Oregon, in the early morning. You follow the lettuce inside the distribution center, and the scale is overwhelming. The building is enormous, perhaps 20 acres under one roof, the ceiling 40 feet high, fluorescent lights hanging in rows creating bright illumination. But the temperature is cold, held at 36 degrees throughout the entire space. You see your breath clouding. Workers wear insulated jackets, knit caps, gloves. They move quickly, partly to stay warm through activity, partly because efficiency is essential in this business, where time is measured in hours and spoilage is always threatening. The lettuce is unloaded by forklift operators who maneuver through narrow aisles between towering stacks of pallets. Each pallet holds dozens of crates, each crate holding dozens of heads of lettuce, the stacks rising 15 feet high, secured with plastic wrap. The lettuce is logged into inventory systems assigned a location in the warehouse, stored to wait for orders. Around you, other products wait in similar stacks. Pallets of apples from Washington, grapes from Chile, oranges from Florida, berries from Mexico. Meat and poultry in one section, dairy products in another, frozen foods in a separate freezer warehouse where the temperature is 0 degrees. The variety is staggering, the abundance almost incomprehensible, millions of pounds of food. from dozens of countries, all held in suspended animation by cold, waiting to be distributed to supermarkets across the Pacific Northwest. You watch as orders are filled. Workers with handheld scanners receive instructions, drive forklifts to specific locations, retrieve specific pallets, bring them to the loading dock. There, the pallets are loaded onto delivery trucks, smaller refrigerated trucks that will make local deliveries to supermarkets. Each truck has its route, its schedule, its list of stores to visit. The lettuce that was harvested in California 36 hours ago is now being loaded for delivery to a supermarket in suburban Portland. You follow one truck on its rounds. The driver pulls up to the back of a supermarket, backs the truck to the loading dock, opens the refrigerated cargo area. Cold air billows out, condensing in the warmer outside air. Store employees help unload, checking invoices against deliveries, scanning barcodes, moving products quickly inside. Inside the supermarket's back room, you find more cold storage, walk-in coolers and freezers, maintaining different temperatures for different products. Produce goes into one cooler, dairy into another, meat into a third. The lettuce is unpacked from its crates, individual heads arranged on display racks in the produce section under refrigerated misting systems that keep them cool and hydrated. And finally, a customer selects a head of lettuce, places it in a shopping cart, proceeds through checkout, drives home, opens their refrigerator, and places the lettuce in the crisper drawer. The cold chain is complete. From field to refrigerator, the lettuce has never been allowed to warm. Its journey through space measured in thousands of miles. Its journey through time measured in days, but its journey through temperature excursion measured in mere degrees. This system, invisible to most people, operates constantly, everywhere, moving food through webs of refrigeration. Millions of trucks, tens of thousands of warehouses, hundreds of thousands of supermarkets, all connected by cold. Without this infrastructure, cities could not be fed. The variety of food people expect, strawberries in winter, salmon from distant oceans, vegetables from other hemispheres, would be impossible. The workers in the cold, you find yourself now standing inside a refrigerated warehouse in Minnesota in 1985, experiencing what workers in these facilities experience every shift. The temperature is -10 degrees. You're wearing an insulated jacket, thermal pants, insulated boots, a knit cap pulled low, gloves, and still the cold penetrates, a bone-deep chill that makes muscles ache and joints stiffen. A forklift operator drives past, his breath a constant cloud of vapour, his face red from cold. He's been working in this temperature for 4 hours, with one 15-minute break in the warming room. 4 more hours remain in his shift. The forklift's metal seat is cold, even through his insulated pants. His hands, even in gloves, grow numb on the steering wheel. The cold makes everything harder. Metal becomes brittle, batteries drain faster, hydraulic fluid thickens, machines operate less smoothly. He manoeuvres the forklift down a narrow aisle between walls of frozen food, pallets of frozen vegetables, frozen pizza, frozen chicken nuggets, ice cream, thousands of products stacked to the ceiling. He locates the pallet he needs, slides the forks underneath, lifts carefully, backs out of the aisle, drives to the loading dock where a refrigerated truck waits. The loading dock itself is a compromise, doors opening to the outside, where it's 60 degrees warmer, creating constant air exchange, cold air flowing out, warm air seeping in. The facility loses hundreds of dollars per hour in wasted cooling at the loading docks, but there's no alternative. Trucks must be loaded, products must move. Workers at the dock wear the most insulation, layered clothing, hand warmers in their pockets, scarves wrapped around faces. They work in 30-minute rotations, 30 minutes on the dock, 30 minutes inside doing other work in warmer areas, back and forth through the shift. Even so, frostbite is a constant risk. exhaustion is cumulative. By the end of a shift, workers are drained, their bodies depleted from hours of fighting cold. You follow a worker into the warming room during break. The room is heated to 70 degrees, almost uncomfortably warm by contrast. Workers sit on benches, removing gloves and hats, holding hands near the heater, feeling returning to numb fingers with painful tingling. They drink hot coffee, eat snacks, trying to fuel their body's internal heating. Some close their eyes, trying to rest, knowing they must return to the cold in minutes. The work pays reasonably well, better than non-refrigerated warehouse work, partly as compensation for the harsh conditions. But the toll is real. Workers develop chronic cold sensitivity, joint problems, respiratory issues from constantly breathing cold air. Turnover is high. Young workers last a few years, then move to warmer jobs. Older workers develop strategies, constant movement, extra layers, better gear, but eventually most leave. Yet the work is essential. These warehouses, these workers in the cold, make possible the frozen food sections in every supermarket, the ice cream available year-round, the convenience of prepared frozen meals. The cold chain depends on people willing to work in these conditions, to spend their shifts in temperatures well below freezing, to keep the system running. The modern refrigerator. You find yourself now in a showroom in 1995, looking at the latest refrigerators. They've evolved dramatically from the simple white boxes of the 1950s. These models are larger, some 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide, 2 feet deep, with capacities of 25 cubic feet or more. The exteriors come in colours now, white still, but also almond, black, stainless steel. The designs are sleeker, with smooth lines and hidden hinges. This particular model is a side-by-side. The freezer on the left, the refrigerator on the right, both accessed through full-height doors. The doors have built-in dispensers for ice and water, eliminating the need to open the door for a cold drink. You press a button and ice cubes tumble into a glass. You press another button and chilled water flows from a spout. The water is filtered, the ice is fresh, the convenience is remarkable. Inside, the shelves are adjustable glass, easy to clean, transparent so you can see everything at a glance. The vegetable crispers have humidity controls, slide a vent open for low humidity, better for fruits, closed for high humidity, better for leafy vegetables. There are specialised compartments. A meat drawer kept slightly colder than the rest of the refrigerator. A butter compartment at just the right temperature to keep butter spreadable, but not melted. The freezer has wire baskets and shelves, organising space efficiently. The ice maker is built in, connected to the home's water line, producing ice automatically, storing it in a bin, never running out. The interior lights are bright LEDs illuminating every corner. The technology inside is more sophisticated too. Electronic thermostats maintain precise temperatures. Multiple fans circulate cold air evenly, eliminating warm spots. Defrost cycles are automatic and adaptive, running only when needed, minimizing frost buildup while saving energy. The compressor uses newer refrigerants, no longer CFCs, which were banned for damaging the ozone layer, but HFCs, which are ozone safe, though still contributing to climate change. The refrigerator is also more efficient. Better insulation means the compressor runs less frequently. Improved seals keep cold air inside. The energy consumption is half what it was 20 years ago, despite the larger size and additional features. The efficiency improvements are driven partly by regulations, partly by competition, partly by consumer demand for lower electricity bills. You find yourself now in a kitchen in 2015, looking at an even newer refrigerator. This one has a French door design, 2 doors on top opening to the refrigerator section, a drawer at the bottom for the freezer. The exterior is brushed stainless steel, fingerprint resistant. with a touchscreen display panel on one door. The touchscreen displays the internal temperature, lets you adjust settings, shows when the water filter needs replacing. But it does more. It connects to Wi-Fi, linking the refrigerator to the internet. You can access a camera inside the refrigerator from your smartphone while shopping, checking what you have without needing to remember. The refrigerator can suggest recipes based on its contents, can create shopping lists, can order groceries online. These smart features are still novel, sometimes gimmicky, not always reliable, but they represent a direction, the refrigerator becoming not just a cold storage box, but an intelligent appliance integrated into connected home systems, gathering data about food consumption and user preferences. Yet for all this technology, the basic function remains unchanged. The refrigerator keeps food cold. That's what it's always done, what it will always do. The compressor hums, the fans circulate air, the thermostat maintains temperature, and food stays fresh. Everything else is addition, enhancement, convenience built atop that fundamental purpose. The world transformed you step back now, considering what refrigeration has accomplished, the changes it has brought to how humans live and eat. The transformations are so complete, so thorough, that it's difficult to remember or imagine life before. Seasonal eating has ended. In ancient times, in medieval Europe, even into the early 20th century, what you ate depended on what was growing right now. Apples in autumn, preserved through winter, gone by spring. Strawberries for a few weeks in summer, unavailable the rest of the year. Meat fresh when animals were slaughtered, otherwise salted or smoked or not eaten at all. But now you can buy strawberries in December, apples in May, fresh meat any day of the year. The supermarket's produce section offers vegetables from Chile, grapes from South Africa, fish from Norway, all fresh, all available simultaneously. The seasons have been erased, replaced by a permanent present where all foods are available always. Food waste has decreased dramatically. Before refrigeration, spoilage was constant, inevitable. Perhaps a third of all food produced spoiled before being eaten. Now food lasts days or weeks in the refrigerator, months or years in the freezer. Leftovers are saved, produce stays fresh, milk doesn't sour overnight. Waste still occurs. Americans discard enormous amounts of food, but the waste is from abundance and poor planning, not from inevitable spoilage. Public health has improved. Foodborne illness was once common, sometimes deadly. Meat spoiled quickly, milk carried bacteria, preserved foods were often contaminated. Refrigeration slows bacterial growth dramatically. Milk stays safe for weeks. Meat doesn't rot within hours. The cold chain maintains food safety from processing plant to table, reducing illness, saving lives. Medical care has advanced. Vaccines require refrigeration. Many medications must be kept cold. Organ transplants depend on rapid cooling and transport in refrigerated conditions. The infrastructure of cold storage built for food serves medical needs too, enabling treatments that would be impossible without reliable refrigeration. Yet there are costs. Refrigeration consumes vast amounts of energy. Every refrigerator in every home runs continuously, 24 hours per day, drawing electricity. Multiply this by billions of homes, add the warehouses and trucks and supermarkets, and refrigeration becomes one of the largest electricity consumers globally, contributing significantly to carbon emissions. The refrigerants themselves have caused problems. CFCs destroyed the ozone layer before being banned. HFCs contribute to climate change. The newest refrigerants are better, but still not perfect. Research continues into alternatives, natural refrigerants like carbon dioxide or ammonia, magnetic refrigeration that requires no refrigerant chemicals at all. but change is slow, implementation expensive. And there's the question of dependency. Modern urban life is now impossible without refrigeration. Cities couldn't be fed, supply chains would collapse, stores would empty within days if refrigeration failed. This creates vulnerability to power outages, to system failures, to disruptions. The more essential refrigeration becomes, the more catastrophic its absence. The hum in the night. It is late now. You find yourself standing in a quiet kitchen at night, the house silent around you, the city beyond the windows dark except for scattered streetlights and the distant glow of other homes. The clock on the microwave shows 2:47 a.m. Most people are asleep, but you stand here in darkness looking at the refrigerator. It's a modern appliance, stainless steel, French doors, LED lighting inside, smart features you barely use. Right now it's silent, the compressor in its off cycle, waiting for the temperature to rise slightly before kicking on again. The silence feels almost unnatural. The refrigerator is so constantly present that its absence is noticeable. Then a soft click. The compressor engages. The hum begins, low and steady, a sound so familiar it's usually inaudible, noticed only now in the deep quiet of night. The sound is mechanical, yet organic, rhythmic yet slightly irregular, a living presence in the sleeping house. You open the door. The interior light floods the dark kitchen, bright and cold. The shelves are arranged with ordinary things: milk, eggs, cheese, vegetables, condiments, leftovers in containers, the mundane contents of an ordinary life. Cold air rolls out, flowing past your legs, warmer air rushing in to replace it. You stand there, not particularly hungry, not seeking anything specific, just observing. The cold radiating from the open refrigerator is steady, reliable, taken for granted. You think about the journey that brought this moment into existence. 25 centuries ago, workers in Persia cut thin sheets of ice from shallow pools and packed them into underground chambers with straw insulation. Roman slaves carried snow from mountain peaks to cool the wine of the wealthy. Chinese emperors maintained ritual ice houses, guarding winter's harvest through summer's heat. Medieval peasants descended into root cellars, checking their stores of turnips and apples, hoping the food would last until spring. Centuries of ice harvests on frozen lakes, workers sawing in brutal cold, horses pulling sledges loaded with blocks of ice, sawdust insulation packed between layers, ice houses holding the winter's cold through summer's heat. The ice trade spanning the globe, ships carrying frozen water from Boston to Calcutta, workers unloading blocks in tropical heat, ice sold by the pound to the wealthy few who could afford such luxury. The first crude refrigeration machines, ammonia compressors driven by steam engines, factories producing ice mechanically, ice delivery wagons on city streets. The Iceman a familiar figure, blocks carried on padded shoulders placed in wooden iceboxes, the daily ritual of emptying drip pans. The first electric refrigerators, expensive and risky, gradually becoming reliable and affordable, replacing ice boxes, changing kitchens, changing how people shopped and cooked and lived. The vast infrastructure of cold, refrigerated trucks crossing continents, warehouses the size of cities, maintaining 0 degrees year-round, workers in insulated clothing, spending shifts in freezing temperatures, supermarket coolers and freezers presenting abundance, the cold chain stretching from farms to tables, the system feeding millions. All of this, all these centuries of effort and innovation and labour, so that you can stand in a dark kitchen at 2:47 in the morning and open a refrigerator door and find milk that's still fresh, vegetables that are still crisp, leftovers that haven't spoiled, so that food keeps through the night and through the day and through the week, so that you can take cold for granted, never think about it, never worry that food will spoil, never fear the starvation that haunted every generation before this one. You take nothing from the refrigerator. You simply stand there feeling the cold, seeing the light, hearing the quiet hum. Then you close the door. The light goes out. The cold is sealed back inside. The hum continues, steady and unchanging. You are drifting now. The story is complete. The long journey from ancient ice to modern refrigeration has reached its quiet conclusion. The refrigerator will continue its work through the rest of the night, through tomorrow, through all the days after, running constantly, maintaining cold, performing its small miracle so automatically, so reliably, that it becomes invisible. Rest now. The cold will keep until morning. The food is safe. The ancient problem of preservation, the struggle against spoilage and decay, the desperate need to make food last, all of this has been solved, or at least managed, by the machine humming quietly in the darkness. The rhythm of the compressor is steady, hypnotic, on, then off, on, then off. The thermostat measuring, deciding, cycling, maintaining the perfect temperature. The cold air circulating, flowing over shelves and through drawers, keeping everything just at the edge of freezing without freezing. That precise balance between too warm and too cold. Outside the world sleeps. Inside the refrigerator works. It's always worked, will always work, as constant as breathing, as essential as sleep. The technology hidden inside, the compressor, the condenser coils, the evaporator, the refrigerant flowing through its cycle, absorbing heat here, releasing it there, moving cold from inside to outside, defying entropy, maintaining order against the natural tendency toward warm chaos. All of this operates without thought, without attention, automatic and perfect. The kitchen is dark again. Your eyes adjust slowly. The refrigerator is a pale rectangle against the wall, its form barely visible, but its presence certain. The hum is your companion now, a meditation, a lullaby. Let it carry you towards sleep. The cold is there. It has always been there, waiting. From the first human who packed meat in snow, to the Persian workers building yakhchals, to the Roman slaves carrying ice from mountains, to the ice harvesters on frozen lakes, to the factory workers tending mechanical compressors, to the engineers designing ever better machines, to the warehouse workers in freezing cold, to you standing in your kitchen in the middle of the night, all connected by this simple need, this quest for cold, this desire to preserve, to keep, to hold back time and decay for just a little while longer. Sleep now. The refrigerator will continue through the night. The food will be there in the morning, fresh and cold, ready for breakfast. For the new day, for life continuing, the hum will fade from your awareness as you drift away, but it will remain steady and true, the quiet heartbeat of modern life, the small machine that changed the world. The cold waits, the food keeps, the night passes. Rest